When Mike was 15 years old, his mom decided to move out of Rodeo.
Michael didn't want to leave.
Mike decided to stay and do his own thing.
He went to stay at Billy's, and that was fine with me because I knew it was a good, safe place for him to be.
Mike moved into the garage, and he became a part of our family. He was like another son to my mom and another brother to us.
By then, him and Billy were well on their way to getting the band together, and music was everything.
They would come home from school and play on the weekends.
They definitely had talent, and I realized they're more than just a garage band.
Billy and Mike were 15 years old when they started to go to Gilman.
Ladies, Gilman Street was the last vestige of punk.
It was in the warehouse district of West Berkeley.
It was just an all-ages club with a lot of kids just really having a good time.
It was punk rockers, it was sort of misfits.
The kind of kids that just didn't fit in that well at their schools.
At that time, Billy Joe was trying to find his own way, breaking from the family a little bit, creating his own community.
He was really more into, wanting to make music and be around more people who were into being completely and totally different.
I don't think he found his place in school, but at the Gilman, he found his soulmates in music and lifestyle and philosophy.
They found punk, and it was like, stand back, this is where my life is.
But they weren't immediately welcomed into the mainstream punk scene.
In the beginning, as Sweet Children, they were not accepted.
The Gilman wouldn't let them play. They said they weren't punk enough.
There was some resistance initially because people weren't used to stuff that didn't sound as mean.
They were just a lot poppier than a lot of the bands.
Around that time, John Kiffmeyer joined the band.
John Kiffmeyer, he was in a band called Isocracy, and they were a pretty big local band, and Billy used to go see them play, and one thing led to another. John ended up being their drummer.
He gave them some more street cred.
John helped them get shows at Gilman.
He was definitely the element that they needed at that time.
These new bands that were playing shows at Gilman Street every weekend were on this label Lookout.
Lookout Records was just starting to get some brand recognition, with local punk rockers.
So John called me up and said, hey, I got this new band called Sweet Children and we want to play. And I said, well, there's some stupid high school party next weekend. And John said, we'll be there. I was just transfixed right from the start. It was like Billy was a star already, and it was like seeing the Beatles play at Shea Stadium. As soon as they were finished, I said, well, I want to make a record with you guys. Billy was like, yeah, cool.
Around that time, they decided to change their name to Green Day.
They changed their name about 2 weeks before the first EP was going to come out. I just blew a gasket and says, you can't do that. What the hell does Green Day mean?
Green Day is a song about smoking weed all day long, and that's where the name came from.
He said, everybody knows you as Sweet Children. You're nuts. But once they decided something, that's how it went. The first EP came out in April of 1988. It was called 1,000 Hours.
1,000 hours.
And it was about a year later when they came out with their first album, which was called 39 Smooth.
Once the record came out, there started to be a real buzz about them.
We sold out the pressing of 1,000 and repressed it.
Billy Joe is like, whoa, there's actually people out there who want to hear my music.
Billy and Mike were 18 when we first released 39 Smooth.
I remember being in high school with Billy Joe. School didn't interest him. He was sitting in class writing songs. He was really more into, wanting to make music.
Nothing ever will be the same.
Billy Joe ended up not graduating from high school. He didn't receive his diploma.
My mom, she'd love her kids to finish school. She would all like us to go to college and be professors or doctors.
But I also think that she believed in him as a musician, that he had a place to go other than school.
Mike always did good in school as far as being able to, stay with it and go to class.
He wanted to complete high school to make my mother and father proud.
Mike graduated from Pinole Valley in May of '90, and the day after he graduated, they went on tour for like a 45-day tour.
They got their own van and they took off.
They'd go to ridiculous extremes to play. They would play anywhere.
Here we go again.
half of these shows are shows that are in people's basements and at people's houses.
Sometimes they got a place to sleep and a meal, and that was their pay.
It was incredible, the support system and the network that was within the punk rock scene throughout the country. You realize there's so many towns out there with kids that were just like you.
Billy was like, I was in Ohio, and they knew the words to my songs. So it was enlightenment and also motivator for him to keep moving forward.
By that time, they were starting to get pretty popular, but everything was about to change.
John Kiffmeyer decided to leave the band to pursue his education and attend college away from the Bay Area.
To him, being in a band was more about having fun.
John just thought it was time, for a change.
I think the boys are really hurt by that.
Billy and Mike, for about the last 7 or 8 years, that's all they'd done was play music. They had no other skills that they knew of. It was just like incomprehensible to them that you walk away from something like that.
They were really close to breaking up when John left.
John was a real anchor to the band, and they were a bit scared about what was going to happen.
Green Day's first album, 39 Smooth, was released in 1990.
Soon after, John Kiffmeyer decided to leave the band to pursue his education.
As much as they were angry with him for what they saw as deserting the band, I think they were probably really hurt as well.
It was unfortunate, but they were going to move on. Mike and Billy were going to be a band, one way or the other.
Shortly thereafter, they met up with Trey.
He was playing with Larry's band, the Lookouts.
I said maybe you guys should try jamming together.
And as soon as they played with Trey a few times, it was obvious the magic was there. And they just flowed like gravy. It was perfect.
Trey Cool, known also as Frank Evan Wright III, was born in Frankfurt, Germany, 9 December 1972.
My brother Trey was a really cute baby. And old ladies used to come up and, oh, look at this beautiful baby girl. And he would kick them.
I was in the military at the time, and when I got out of the Army, we moved up here in the mountains north of Laytonville. It's about 3.5 hours north of San Francisco.
It's kind of a mix of sort of back to the land hippies, crazy mountain people, cowboys.
We didn't have electricity or TV or cartoons, but Trey actually liked it. He could, run around and make as much noise as he wanted.
The great evil, Train Evil, will now attempt to scare the horses to death.
He was loud, rowdy, big mouth, always putting on an act.
You go up to somebody on Fifth Avenue and you say, hello, Chop, do you have AIDS? Cat.
He was a handful. Larry Livermore was our neighbor up on the mountains.
When I was a kid, I always thought of him as this wild kind of punk rock guy.
I was trying to have a punk rock band, so I needed a drummer. There was a lot of musicians there, but they were mostly hippie musicians, and they hated the kind of music we were trying to play. So I figured the only way was to get one of the kids that just didn't really have any preconceptions.
He needed a drummer really bad, so he said, hey, kid, how about these? As soon as he got on the drums, he just took off.
Trey was only 11 or 12 years old at the time. He drummed on everything. Any surface was his drum. In the car, it was like, could you please quit that?
He got to where he could play the drums pretty good.
I'd say within a month or two, we were pretty sure we had a band.
And that's how they formed the band, the Lookouts.
Oh, you'll remember this for the rest of your life.
We were a punk rock band, and we all had to have punk names. And Trey Cool was as obvious, it seemed to me. I'd had a little bit of French, so why not?
He loved it. Oh, he thought, I'm a rock star now.
Once Trey got into high school, he was pretty serious about his drums.
I could tell he had something going for him that was really special.
He had the talent, he had the will to want to do it, and he wanted to get out of school a little early and start music and move away.
I I understood it right away, and so did his mother, that if he was going to make music a career, he had to leave this little town.
They realized there was no point in sticking it out for graduation. He knew he wasn't going to really do college as far as be an accountant. I mean, what would he possibly do other than drums?
Trey dropped out early, and then from there went straight to Berkeley.
There was this music community forming, and there was tons of opportunities.
Trey just kind of started getting to know everybody.
He was just the most outgoing human being you can imagine. Really the class clown of the punk scene.
Trey had met Billy and Mike at Gilman and hung out with them a while.
They were looking for a drummer at the time, and Trey just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Trey was just such a great drummer and so perfectly fit with those guys.
Like a glove.
When Trey came on, he took him to the next level.
I kind of knew at that point there was no chance that the Lookouts were going to keep going. I knew that if they succeeded, it would do us a lot of good at the label as well. I started the record label, Lookout Records, and in the spring of 1991, I sent them into the studio.
Kerplunk was 3 days with a budget of about $1,100. You know, load in at 10 in the morning, work till 2 a.m.
Let's just do it as quick and cheap as we can.
I heard literally like a few seconds of the first chords, and I knew this was like an album way beyond anything we'd done before.
Kerplunk was released in January of 1992.
The day it came out, we sold out the whole pressing at 10,000, which in those days was unheard of. I mean, the biggest album we'd ever had before, it sold 2,000 in a whole year.
Kerplunk was a killer record that really kind of marked Green Day's arrival as like a staple of the punk scene.
By the end of 92, they could do tours where they were playing pretty big places all over the country.
They were selling out Gilman Street every time they played and selling out some other clubs that were bigger than Gilman Street. They toured all over Europe.
And they came back and they looked completely different. They weren't kids with backwards baseball hats anymore. You know, they had tattoos and biker boots. They looked like rock stars. They're selling out clubs, but the records were not in the stores.
I don't think Lookout could keep up with the demand for Green Day anymore.
That's when they started getting a lot of attention from the more mainstream press and from the bigger record labels.
5 or 6 different major labels were trying to get their attention all at the same time, and it kind of created a bidding war.
Billy was totally blown away. He had no idea that people had been watching him, you know, and they knew how good he was.
The band realized we need to go the step farther. They had so outgrown their world that they came from.
But the scene that they came from frowned upon success.
In the punk rock scene, it's always been kind of a given that if you sign to a major label, you're considered a sellout.
How could you not be conflicted in that situation? I mean, you know, a 22-year-old kid making the biggest decision of his life, you know, and knowing you're going to leave certain people behind.
But they were high school dropouts, and this was their big chance. They were sort of like, it.
Green Day signed to Reprise in 93.
The next thing I know, we were in the studio, and they made a good, raw, like, hard-driving punk record.
They were making a huge leap to, you know, Kerplunk to Dookie. You know, larger studio, and spending more time, and had a producer.
And I was like, oh my God, I think we have something here. The record came out in February of 1994.
And Dookie Mania hit.
It pretty much just turned everything up to 10.
Every time you turned on MTV, I'd see Green Day.
Longview went to #1, and I remember going to them, guys, you're blowing up, and it's huge. They were kind of speechless.
Billy met Adrian on the first tour.
We started talking on the phone, and we became friends over the phone.
Billy started to fall in love with Adrian, but they couldn't be together because of distance.
He asked me to come out for the summer, and when I got out here, he said, let's get married.
Today is the first day of the rest of our lives.
We put our wedding together in less than 2 weeks. It was quite the whirlwind. We got married, found out I was pregnant, and then he left for tour.
Green Day had the opening slot on Lollapalooza that year.
But, you know, they felt a little out of place on Lollapalooza. The older bands were kind of like, you know, who are these guys? Why is everybody going so nuts over them?
Perry Farrell's responsible for starting Lollapalooza, and Green Day didn't get respect from him.
Perry Farrell didn't want us on the bill anymore because he thought that we were some band that some corporation put together or something. You know, we knew where we come from, and, you know, we don't need to really explain it to anybody.
It came to the point in the Lollapalooza tour when Green Day was definitely ready to move on, and that's when they did the first Woodstock reunion.
I was like, holy you're playing Woodstock, man.
They flew in that helicopter and looked down at that crowd and went, wow, this is crazy.
It was a very rainy morning. Green Day comes on stage, and it is a mess.
They got out there, they played, they rocked really hard, and they figured make the most of it, and they just started a big mud war.
This isn't love and peace, it's anarchy.
When Billy Joe put the mud in his mouth, I mean, I knew it was going to just escalate.
Everybody was covered in mud. Eventually, fans started jumping up on stage.
A security guard mistook Mike for an audience member, and he ran up and tackled him. And Mike went over onto a monitor and broke out his front teeth.
Hey, calm down, man. Look, we're just trying to have a little fun, rock and roll.
It was, at that point, it turned into, oh my God, we have to get safe. And we immediately got in helicopters. It was scary. It was like the truest rock and roll moment you could possibly ask for.
Woodstock 94 was just Green Day's show.
It was just a huge success for them, and it was really covered in the media.
Woodstock made Green Day a traveling riot. That's it. Mob scene, everywhere they played.
All of a sudden, we were selling 400,000 records a week.
Dookie sold 10 million records, which is huge. That's diamond.
I am one of those melodramatic fools.
It was scaring Billy that it was selling so many records.
And it now became a broader cultural thing, and it became something that actually crossed over to pop.
They introduced kids to punk rock who didn't know they liked punk rock.
Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me.
And they started worrying about losing their fan base. They all felt a little guilty about it.
There's always a sense of guilt that goes along with that. I mean, not just about what you left behind, but who you left behind.
When a punk band gets big, all the punks get mad.
The crowd at Gilman turned their backs on them, you know, so that they were, you know, they sold out.
They were exiled from the Gilman.
It affected Billy a great deal because those were his friends, and all of a sudden he's an outcast, and he didn't care about being a rock star or anything. He just wanted to play music.
Knowing what the community was to Billy and Mike and Trey, it was heartbreaking for them and for us to see it happen because the Gilman held such a place in their hearts and their lives.
It was as much their family as the family they grew up in.
I can't imagine how tough that is to have to just turn your back and walk away from something you considered your home and family.